Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, where inspired women talk about the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness. We ask, in what ways can we show up more fully, live more meaningfully, parent more wholly, and love more unconditionally? How can we mine the wisdom from the experiences of our lives and expand into those challenges? If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs, so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way. And if you feel like giving a little back to this free content, please become a patron of the show and receive extra member benefits for less than a coffee a month. Or you can leave a review on iTunes and Facebook, all of which helps the podcast keep going and reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul. Head on over to patreon.com/NTM podcast to find out more. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is how are you handling going back to, in inverted commas, school of your choosing, school of your destination, school of your desired outcome. How are you handling the entire situation of kinder or childcare, or just, as Bridget said, emerging from the cocoon?
The post-COVID world of education for your child. That kind of encapsulates it.
That was more articulate. So before we jump into that, I'd love to remind you to jump onto nourishingthemother.com.au, scroll on down to the red banner where you can drop in your email and join our community so you never need to miss out on what is happening in our world, which means everywhere we've popped up in media and interviews, everywhere we've got a blog or something special to say, and when we have courses or downloads that you can take part in. So if you really want to be more intimately involved in nourishing your inner mother with us, then please sign up, nourishingthemother.com.au. All right.
So, it's a big week happening here for a lot of people, at least in Victoria. I know that we have obviously our listeners all around the world. In fact, some of our listeners in the UK don't have their kids going back to school till August, which kind of blows my mind because it just seems like months and months away. But that's the difference, I think, in terms of how COVID is being experienced in different parts of the world. But here in Australia, some states have already gone back to school. We're going back this week. It's staggered, so just the younger kids at the moment. And there's a lot of questioning, I guess, about is it too soon? Is it the right thing? How are kids going to go? For some of our kids, we've been kind of self-isolating for upwards of 10 or more weeks now. Like, it's a significantly long time. There's some parents who are still not sending their kids yet because they're not too sure or they're feeling anxious. So we thought, let's open the conversation up. What are we doing about it? What's it look like for us? What are our considerations? How are we supporting our children? What are we working through ourselves to feel in alignment with our choice to go back? And what do our days look like around scaffolding our kids to help them feel as grounded and connected to the new world that we find ourselves in, and the changing nature of things day by day. Yeah.
How are you managing that?
So for me, well, it's so interesting, isn't it? Because I really feel like we've gone like full circle so much in this conversation around like homeschooling and unschooling and the education system. And in fact, as much as I have loved having my son at home, I commented, I think, in one of our recent podcasts that if I was to homeschool, it wouldn't look like school at home, like what it looks like. And with the nature of my family dynamic with a baby / toddler, it's not something that I am willing to take the responsibility for at this time in his education, to homeschool him. If our circumstances were different, that might be different, but I don't think I can do it justice. So it's a really
I really get that.
Well, I just don't know. I know that I can't. And so that's tricky to kind of fully
what makes you think you
knowing.
Like, what's the part of you that goes, I just know I can't? Like, what part is that?
I don't think I'm dedicated enough to create the framework with which for him to sit in to complete what I think I would want him to complete to be where I think he would need to be. Because I still think I don't know, for me it feels far too big a leap to kind of go, all right, we're just checking out of the education system, we're going our own way and taking responsibility for that for the next, 12 years. Because I do think that if you are going to go rogue and do it on your own, that you have to have a long game in mind for that, and that I don't know that you want to jump in and out. I don't know that that's a great idea, particularly because if you're to really home educate, it's going to look quite different to the school form of education. So that's kind of where I come from with it. And my husband and I have had a lot of conversations about our views, and I've had conversations with my mum too, who's a teacher, and her reflections on like what makes a well-rounded child, and her reflections on what impacts a child. And you talk to every teacher and they'll say like the home life is really everything, and that school is the add-on, right? And that the home life determines so much for the children that they encounter. So my husband and I talked a lot about us noticing and taking responsibility for gaps that we see, or emerging areas of high value and growing genius, and that we will look to expand upon those and really allow as much self-directed learning and experiences that we can support at home, and that will be our version of, I guess, child-led living, but that we can see a role for school in doing those things that are less so for us, I suppose. Because I can see that literacy and numeracy schools really helped heaps with that. Like I haven't really had to do anything, and my son can like read heaps of stuff, and he's really, really good at maths, and like it ticks all these boxes for me that on things that I'm not really that lit up about teaching. So yeah, I can kind of say that we're choosing school, and yes, there's lots of things that could be improved about it, but I also can see the value of, for all of us, being thrust into a system that we don't really agree with. Because even like you look at COVID and you look at all the different responses to COVID, and people who've ever got an opinion, and sometimes you need to be really challenged in order to change something. And I think that's true of children. They need to be challenged often to create the fire within to change something and to find their voice. And just like I can see that it could be, beneficial sometimes for us to have the teacher that we don't agree with, because it gives us, opportunity to cultivate better communication skills, or, to take our power back, or to build relationships with kids around us because we're feeling bullied by the teacher. Like there's so much dynamics at play, even in the challenge, that I'm not kind of naive enough to think that you would take a child out of a system and think that they're going to have this like rainbows and unicorns, beautiful alternative life with no challenge. Like I can see that your form of challenge is just going to change. The kind of conflict is just going to change because we need it. So I go back with, clear alignment in the choice to go back. And I go back at this time particularly because I can see with our school, there is a strong focus on the social and emotional well-being of the children. And this time of resettling is key, I think. And so I want him to be part of that. I don't want to kind of wait till it all kind of blows over, or wait till we're more sure that this is the right time, or wait until there's less, broader anxiety and pop him back in then, because there's benefit for him to be part of, a community that's having to readjust together. Like there's kind of this connection in that, and there's a shared experience that will be meaningful for him in that I don't think I want him to miss out on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, really super does.
Yeah. So that's kind of my what it looks like for us, is lots of conversations, visiting the school, like talking about what it's going to be like. I said to him last week, the school goes back on Tuesday. We're having lots of conversations about that happening. I said, what do you want? What would be one thing that you would love to do before school goes back? And it was have a friend over for a movie. So we did that. I said to him, okay, so we're going to have more days off, this next kind of couple of terms or whatever. And I said, so let's start thinking about things that we want to do. After school, let's kind of take afternoon tea, and we'll set up the bike jumps. And so I'm trying to give him agency around the things that he doesn't have as much agency in, so that he, the jarring nature of this transition won't be as dark for him, right? Because they've had so much freedom, like at home, like you can kind of, I don't know, like it's freedom to be you, and now you're going back into a system which is has much more constraint. And so I'm aware that constraint will there'll be friction and there'll be resistance in going back and trying to fit into that kind of model. And so it's about giving him choice where I can around that, so that he feels some part of that decision making,
So has he had an emotional reaction at all, or not?
He often says, I hate school, I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back to school, I don't like school. It's just his general attitude. He only likes PE, lunch, and riding to and from school, essentially. But I can see him saying that, but I also know that there are some things that he really enjoys, but that he's not thinking about those things. He's thinking more about the recreational time and the play time and the fun time, because his focus is more social than sitting down and doing the work and being. He just doesn't like to be told what to do. He's like me. And so he perceives it that, he has to go there and get told what to do. But I haven't seen a great deal of resistance yet. He seems to be resigned. He seems to be resigned to the fact that he's going back. I'm seeing more challenge actually in his sister. I think she's going to find it harder in my 3-year-old. And in fact, whenever anybody asks Hugo about school, she says, "You hate school, don't you, Hugo?" She's always like
feels in competition with school. Almost.
Yeah, in some ways, yeah. It's interesting. So I'm just trying to stay fairly open-minded about what it's going to look like, and really try to build as much room into my afternoons after school, knowing that there might need to be a lot of like parenting intensity. Yeah.
So when you know / anticipate that is going, how do you then chunk that backwards into, well, then that means that what I used to do during that time is no longer possible, which means my day has to move to there, my day has to move. Like, what is the backwards chunking into almost like a goal setting in reverse, so that you're clearing that time knowing that you need to be present and on?
So for me, it's definitely making sure that dinner's made, like, because I will get stressed and triggered if I'm dealing with complete like shit shows and there's no food that's ready for dinner, right, at 5 o'clock or 5:30, and I've got a hungry baby or a screaming 3-year-old because she's overtired or whatever. So making sure that I have got dinner sorted is the first thing. and then having a level of structure around, like if he's got some screen time after school, and I need to make sure that I'm really on around when that finishes, and also being present to what the behavior can look like when I set that limit. Because if there's feelings there and hurt or anger there, then that's going to come out when I set the limit. A little bit like when I turn off my three-year-old shows. Like I'm prepared for the fact that when I say to her, this is the last one, she's often going to really resist that and get angry or have a big release around it. And so I don't want to be like huffy and puffing and annoyed at her or giving in and give her another show, because I haven't been prepared for that possible reality, that that's going to be a difficult transition for her, for example. And in my son's case, it's going to be a difficult transition for him, that I'm asking him to come off screens and help me set the table, for example, or ask him to help with his younger sister. At the moment, I can ask him to do pretty much anything, and he's super willing because he's super connected to himself and he's living in his highest values all of the time. So he's really cooperative, he's really agreeable, bloody lovely. Kind of, this whole ISO thing's been wonderful for me. Like, I really love it. But going back to, school, there's going to be potentially a bit more of a rub there. So it's just meeting that in myself, so knowing what I need to be able to anchor into the emotions of it, and having the long game. I mean, I think parenting is always a long game, and when you can see it as a long game and see the value in meeting the emotions and meeting the resistance and going into the dysregulation as opposed to trying to go around it, then I love it. I gain energy from that, because I know that I'm taking you to where I need to take you to help you work through where you're at. And on the other side of that, this will feel good for both of us. Like, I'm not trying to avoid it. A little bit like in these moments when you feel out of control, or you feel like you want to hurt me, or that you're just furious and angry and like all of the things. None of that's bigger than me. I can just be like the container for all of that. Like, I can hold this, and that's the intention with which I'm meeting those things. I'm not like getting annoyed at the way that you're speaking to me in that moment, because I can see that that's a symptom of something much deeper. And then after we've worked through the thing that's much deeper, then we'll be talking about, hey, the tone you might have used, or, all of that stuff that I want to be learned and understood after we've kind of met the furor that's on the top. Yeah. So I'm feeling good at the moment. I'm feeling prepared at the moment.
It sounds like that's not an accident, though. Like, I hear you say, I'm feeling really good, and I'm feeling really. So this is me pouring myself a cup of tea. I hope you are too, if you're listening. But it's not random, and you haven't just got lucky. Like, when I listen to you, there's a heck ton of thought, preparation, skills, practices, continuing practices, continuing of meeting. Like, it's not an accident.
No, it's not. And I guess I would ask everybody, like, what are you most well practiced at? What do you rise to the most? What is it that you see as a challenge and just eat it for breakfast, right? Because everybody has the thing that they meet that they almost don't see as a challenge, because it's meaningful, that challenge. If this becomes part of doing that thing, is that this challenge is integrated in the whole of what it means to pursue that. That's how I feel about this. That's how I feel about seeing wider than surface level behavior, and seeing wider than my own triggered states, because those are just feedback for me to learn from. And that is a language in our family, so that my husband knows that too about himself. And so that therefore means that there is a healthy, like, respect and understanding about what it means to communicate respectfully, because we're all responsible for ourselves here, you know, and can see when someone's needing something, you know, and like, yeah. But you're right, it's not effortless. It's a practice, and all practices take work and dedication and upskilling and refinement.
Yep. But I also think it's like anyone who has a mastery. It doesn't matter what the thing is that they are masterful at. They are masterful at it because of a set of choices and a set of ways of thinking and a set of beliefs about themselves or the world and a set of practices. That's why that book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, went so fucking gangbusters, because he looked at success across all sorts of different fields and dialed it down to 7 common traits or states or ways of being and belonging. This is no different. You have a mastery in parenting, which makes your parenting more easeful because of the level of mastery you have, which has been built through a conscious set of practices, ways of belonging, ways of being, ways of thinking, and ways of acting. None of those are by accident. So you can't, you know, I mean, you and I, well, you know, we've often had this conversation even in relation to birth. You want to birth like that woman over there? What choices did she make? Dial them down. Ask several people that have had ecstatic birth experiences. What were the choices they had in common? It's not an accident. Turns out there's a level of cause and effect. So I get riled up when all of a sudden, same with fucking financial mastery. Like, how many courses, particularly now during COVID, are there out there about building wealth? Declutter your, you know, money mindset beliefs. Take in new ones. Learn from me how I have this mastery over money and wealth. Yes, I do want to learn from you, but I also want to understand how you see the world, what the set of beliefs are, the ways that you don't think and act, which are just as important to the ways that you do think and act, which build the mastery. It's literally cause and effect. Oh, okay. So if I actually took those set of ways of being, belonging, thinking, and doing, and I believed, belonged, thought, and did, I had to think then. Then my reality would be as your reality is. So I don't want anybody getting stuck in this vortex where they go, oh, Bridget, you're so lucky. You have this husband who just owns his own shit. And you're so lucky that, you know, you can just do this and you can just meet your kids. And, you know, gosh, that sounds so easeful, which is like the opposite of the experience that I have. So either, Bridget, you're lying and not telling the whole truth, or you're hiding and masking pieces of it on social media, you know, or I don't know what the other alternative is. You just don't live like me. Neither of those things turn out to be correct. This is Bridget in her full authenticity saying none of this happens by accident. Here is the ways that I see the world, belong to the world. Here's how I don't see it and don't think about it. Here's how I do see it and think about it. And here's what I do in response to those. You want the same level of whatever is happening in my life? Just do that. You know?
Yeah,
I feel like
I do know.
Somewhere along the ways.
No, and I'm thinking also about the sort of lifestyle choices that I've made, right? Like, so I've chosen consciously, and chose this many years ago, that I was no longer going to do the 12-hour corporate life, 12-hour day corporate life thing, because I simply knew it was at complete odds with the way that I wanted to raise my children, like and the kind of way that I wanted to parent them. You know, the way that I want to parent my children means that I have to think, like, what do I need to put in to myself so that I can show up as the person I want to be for them, and not give them the scraps around other things that are more important. Because I see how I show up to them as just as, if not more important than how I might speak on the phone to some important, you know, business call, or speak on the phone to some like deal I'm trying to do, right? Like I expect of myself the same level of communication with my children as I would expect of myself with, you know, a important whoever, right? And like, of course we stumble because we're also incredibly imprinted by a culture that doesn't respect children. So I also have to pick myself up on my language. But that's a learned behavior of, oh, like I just spoke to you pretty rudely. Like I'll go and apologize to my child, right? Like for where I like didn't be the person I wanted to be in that moment. And that's the level of importance that I put on it, because it's a high value. As for you.
Yeah. But that's what I want to say is you can have the exact reality that you're talking about here. You just need to train yourself the way that you have trained yourself. You know?
Yeah. And then I'm like, and of course, like I'm doing Queen School, and I'm like looking at Julie's like relationship, like fucking like ninja work. And I'm like, mate, like I've got to, that's my next level of, I want to like create more mastery there. But you've got to allow, what is it? Like, what's that quote? What does it say? I want the space between where I am and where I want to be to inspire me, not defeat me, or not, you know, because that's the thing, like so often we sell ourselves short because we look at where we want to be and we go, well, I can't have that. And so we stay safe in like this existence place.
Yeah.
Whereas it takes a lot of like, you know, like humility and courage often to go, okay, like I want to get to a place like that, my own version of what that looks like, right? Because we all have our own version of whatever it is that inspires us. It needs to be transmuted and then expressed in our own form. But again, I need to look at what practices can I change and adjust within myself to achieve an outcome like that. Just like you would if you're trying to go for like a personal best in your fitness stuff. I don't know what that is because I don't know about fitness.
No, well, it's interesting actually because I shared, I don't know if you saw today's live in Queen School or not, but I haven't, yesterday,
but I have to watch it.
Well, it was simply that yesterday I was listening to this podcast, and it's completely irrelevant, but I've decided I'm, you know, doing a dive back into body health and, you know, all of that. Probably if I think about it, Lola inspired, but I'm sort of just revisiting a lot of functional body work stuff. So I was listening to this international coach talk about micro training and micro steps, and that he's worked with top level athletes and, you know, taken kids with cerebral palsy who couldn't even wipe their own bottoms to being fully functional adults in their own home. So amazing. Yeah, amazing. So he was just this super rad dude to listen to. And at the end of the day, his message was that it's the micro movements and it's weights. He said, I don't see anybody unless they're ready for a 2-year journey at minimum. Really, for some, could be 20.
Wow.
Like, and 20 in terms of pick your, you know, your life goal. He kind of works with clients for a 2 to 5 year goal setting. So he doesn't talk about results in a shorter time frame than 2 years. So most of his clients hire him for a 2 to 5 year period to walk them through the processes. It's super interesting. And he's also, over the course, he's older now, he's sort of our parents' age, worked towards becoming a poet in the world. And he was saying the poet master that he studied with said to him, well, you know, maybe in 5 years you'll be able to write a sentence. Maybe in 10 years, a paragraph. Maybe. And maybe in 20, you'll actually write a poem that's worth half its salt. Maybe. And I was like, this is so good. This is so good. Because his whole thing was like 2 years. Was it like 2 years? Like before you know it, 2 years will be gone. So it's just 2 years. and we set ourselves up with that's where we want to be. And then he's now, and my skill set is breaking that down into the micro movements, because what you don't want to do is be able to lift 5 kilos and you want to lift the 200 kilo bar, and that where you are right now, you walk over and try and lift the 200 kilo bar and you break your back.
Yeah, yeah.
Or you pop a hernia, or you decide, well, this shit isn't working and I'm never coming back to this gym again.
Like, the gym's fault. Yeah.
Like, you don't go from lifting a 5 kilo weight to lifting a 200 kilo weight without sustaining injury unless you micro move it, micro step it. So in relation, I was just seeing like all of the, for me, that just like opened up a can of worms. I was like, and could connect all of these dominoes around different spiritual practices and relationship and sexuality and parenting. And I'm like, you don't go from the 5 kilo bar to the 200 kilo bar in a month. That's not how it works. So, you know, in couples I'm counseling now, I'm saying to them, you know, have you got 2 years that you can give it? Because to go from where you are to where you want to be, you're probably going to need to commit to that period of time. Are you in for that journey? So, because as soon as you do that, I feel like it alleviates the pressure of right now, because those micro steps become 1, inspiring, 2, experiences of success, and, you know, 3, achievable. And you can just keep stacking them.
I always use this because my son will often look at the dishwasher, like when I'm telling him to unpack it, and he'll like go into like almost like that collapse state because it's too overwhelming, right? And I always think of what John D. Martini says, which is by the inch it's a cinch, and by the mile it's a pile, right? Like, so it's all about
so
like
good.
just chunking it right down.
Yeah,
And then you all of a sudden you've like done it, because because the overwhelm is when you're looking at, and this will be true for Queen School. Like if you've got like,
that's why I was saying it today.
but if you know, like if you haven't like, you know, practiced any of this stuff, you're looking at Queen School and going, oh my God, like, you know, potentially you're going into collapse, or you're going into complete self-rejection because you're like, I can't even do that because it's overwhelming.
Yep.
But it's about chunking, like choosing one practice, you know, and this same truth is true for parenting, like choosing one trigger that you keep coming up with your child and learning the practice of widening into that one thing. And then you build the tolerance within yourself to know that you can continue to meet that. And then you know, your child brings you more and you expand more into that. And that then goes into every area of your life, because you build a level of tolerance and spaciousness to know that you can meet what's coming for you.
About when I was just thinking that, I'm like, yeah, because it's not, you know, I go from potentially where I am to being Bridget. There's a 2-year journey between me and her. Or, you know, my eldest is 14. You could have 13 years between you and me. Now, I'm not saying you can't speed that up and collapse that down, but you can't look at where someone else is and decide you can't reach that bar, or that bar isn't true. You know?
And I think there's a level of, you know, we all need to be, it's like surround yourself, like you're the average of the 5 people we spend the most amount of time with. And so you want to surround yourself with people who keep you on that edge of like,
who pull you forwards.
You know, pull you forward. Like, so there needs to be just enough comfort so that you can feel like you can be there, but not too much that you're
stuck there,
not growing and stuck.
You're stuck. If you're just held in a story, might feel lovely, but you ain't moving out of it.
There's real value in consciously looking at what you're surrounding yourself with and who you're surrounding yourself by, because, you know, the cultural narrative on parenting ain't that shit hot. Like, it ain't that great. So if you're happy with the cultural like norm and that's good for you, then cool. But we're not, and we have continued and do continue to constantly look well beyond that. you know, in terms of how we can grow as parents and how we can help our children grow and how we can expand our skill set and resilience to meet them. You know, and I mean, Julie, that you've you know demonstrated this exquisitely in terms of your journey of sharing with Lola, like what it's been like to parent a child with additional needs, you know, and every edge that takes you to, and the constant, you know, incredible need to dig super deep to meet that, particularly when you have, I mean, she's expertly triggering your every edge.
Yes, she is.
But the grace with which you ask yourself to meet that, right? I mean, like that's like that is ninja work, but it's a mental ninja work. It's the physical, like, you know, working with your own body and knowing, you know, that the beast is within you, right? And knowing how to meet that and mediate that and move that through you consciously is pretty profound work.
Yeah, it is. It is. So we have got, at the moment, we've re-released the oh my God, I've got Serenity Now going through my head. What is it called?
Well, Serenity Now is in there. So we've got it's the Self-Confident Kid Bundle. So this is
Self-Confident Kid Bundle. That's what
we put it together at the beginning of the year. And in fact, the reason why I thought we should relaunch it was because we had somebody get in touch with us who'd gone back and listened to, you know, the episode 6 months ago that we were talking about it in, and she was begging for us to release it again for her. And I thought, you know what, like, there's so much in this.
Yeah, because have we got Transitions Toolkit in there, the Serenity Now Toolkit, which is all about dealing with triggers in real time.
Yeah.
And then we put our home practices in there for your own self-practice and coming back into your own centre, which was our additional bonus to this one.
That's it. And then there's also a bunch of quick reference guides in there. So there's really good stuff around, like, you know, emotional holding with your kids, like, you know, the 101 on that, sibling relationships, which is really big.
It's so rich. God, now I'm remembering all of this content we've created, and I'm like, oh my God, that's good, and that's good. So if you want to do, believe, and have the experience that you're talking about, Bridget, then what we're saying is just resource yourself to make those conscious choices and pull them into your life in micro steps. And all of that is laid out for you in video format, as well as in like a conscious journaling process. So I would absolutely say get that.
And the big thing with the Transitions Toolkit, and also, you know, with all of our work really, is that there's just as much focus on self as there is on the child. Because, you know, you and I, Julie, we've had to both, in preparing for our kids going back to school, is really do a lot of self-inquiry around where we're at and how our children might be reflecting our anxiety or our unwillingness or our fear, you know, and working with that, because that is just as much the practice as, you know, what we do with our children.
Oh,
so that's really...
I wrote a post about that the other day where I was like, it's not conscious parenting if all you're doing is stuff to them. If all you're worried about is fixing them, making them better, making it easier for them, making them cope better, you've missed the mark. This moment is as much for you.
And also, you know, if it's also about, you know, you're focusing on just the crafting of just the right words, because really it's your energy that is the
bodies speak first.
And that and cultivating that is really the first thing that I'm doing is going, okay, how much can I hold here and what do I need to move? You know, like tonight with my daughter, for example, and I need to get our baby sorted. Like, I need my husband to take ownership now. Our whole like bedtime routine now needs to change, because I need you to bath her, dress her, get her ready, because right now I've got to spend this intense time with Sylvie because she's not going to bed the way she is right now. So I need to take care of everything else that's in the way of me being able to fully meet her, so that I can be 100% anchored in whatever comes up, right? Which is her thrashing and angry and not wanting to get into bed you know, and so I'm having to work with my presence and my body, and, you know, it's not what I'm saying to her, it's how much I can be here in this space with her and make this safe for her. Because as soon as I can make it safe within me, I'm co-regulating her in a really beautiful way that means that the work is being done. You know, like, it's not about me making her do anything, because as soon as I can create, you know, this container for her to feel safe and trust, she does it for herself. So, you know, that's an example of, like, looking at, like, all of the things that also need to be shifted and changed to make that a priority, and to also ensure that we as mothers can focus on that child and their needs and not be surrounded by all of the other competing priorities, you know, like the dinner or like the baby or everything. So, yes, hop in and get the self-confident kid.
So you can find out about that through any of our socials, Instagram or Facebook, Nourishing the Mother, as well as nourishingthemother.com.au on our website. You'll be able to get it there. You'll see a link on the front page, as well as in our downloadable shop section. So please feel free to go and have a look at that. And if you would really ready to just have some skills on hand, or some, you know, like having a little Bridget and Julie in your back pocket, then I do think that honestly that's a sensational. It's almost like a audio book and a book all in one. It's pretty good. So definitely get that. All right, we're going to wrap up, Bridgie. How do we connect with you?
suburbansandcastles.com. And you, Jules?
thepleasurenutritionist.com.
Remember to nourish the woman, to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
And if you want to support Nourishing the Mother and all the late nights, the early mornings, the blood, sweat and tears we pour into our art, then please go to patreon.com/NTM podcast and become our patron. As a patron, you're helping all of the cost of operating this podcast, the hosting, the editing, the transcription, helping all of that be completely covered, and joining a community who are all about honouring our journeys and continuing to open. The more support we have, the longer we can last. So become a patron. We'd love to have you. Go to patreon.com/NTM podcast. We literally couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much for listening, and please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.